The scream echoed through the Colorado mountains on a moonless night in 1878, and Declan Vaughn heard it cut through his sleep like a knife blade through silk. He bolted upright in his bed, every muscle in his 6'4" frame tensing as his hand automatically reached for the rifle propped against the wall. The sound had come from outside his cabin, somewhere close, and then it stopped as suddenly as it had begun. Declan waited in the darkness, his breathing controlled, listening to the wind moving through the pines and the distant howl of a wolf pack somewhere up the ridge. Nothing else. He considered going back to sleep, chalking it up to an animal or his imagination, but something kept him alert. Years of living alone in these mountains had honed his instincts to a sharp edge, and those instincts were screaming at him now that something was wrong. He pulled on his trousers and boots, grabbed his rifle, and moved silently to the door. The May night air was cold at this elevation, and his breath misted in front of him as he stepped out onto his porch. The cabin sat in a clearing he had carved out himself 3 years ago when he first came to these mountains, running from memories and a life that had burned to ashes. Around him, the forest pressed close, dark and impenetrable except where starlight managed to filter through the canopy. Declan stood perfectly still, letting his eyes adjust, letting the night reveal its secrets to him. A rustle came from beneath the porch, soft and careful, the sound of something or someone trying very hard not to make noise. He moved to the edge of the porch and crouched down, peering into the darkness under the wooden planks. 2 eyes stared back at him, wide and terrified, catching what little light there was. Human eyes, a woman's eyes. "Please," came a whisper so hoarse it barely registered as sound. "Please do not tell him where I am." Declan felt his heart kick hard against his ribs. He set the rifle down slowly and held up both hands where she could see them. "Nobody's here but me, miss. You are safe. Come on out of there." "He will find me." The voice was breaking, desperate. "He always finds me." "Not tonight, he will not." Declan kept his voice low and steady, the same tone he used with spooked horses. "Come out from under there. You are freezing, and whatever you are running from, we will deal with it together." There was a long pause, and then slowly, painfully, a figure began to emerge from beneath the porch. She moved like every inch hurt, and when she finally crawled out into the starlight, Declan had to force himself not to react to what he saw. The woman was young, maybe 20 or 21, with long, dark hair matted with dirt and leaves. Her dress was torn in several places, and even in the dim light he could see bruises on her arms and face. She was shaking violently, whether from cold or fear, or both he could not tell. "Can you stand?" he asked gently. She tried, got halfway up, and her legs gave out. Declan caught her before she hit the ground, and she flinched so hard at his touch that he almost let go. "Easy now," he said. "I'm not going to hurt you. Let me get you inside where it is warm." "No, please. If he sees light, if he knows anyone, help me." "There is nobody out here for miles," Declan assured her. "This is my land, and I promise you, whoever you are running from is not here." She looked up at him then, really looked at him, taking in his long, dark hair tied back, the thick beard covering his jaw, the breadth of his shoulders, and the scars on his hands. Something in her expression shifted, not quite trust, but maybe the beginning of it. She gave a tiny nod. Declan lifted her carefully, feeling how light she was, how fragile, and carried her into the cabin. He kicked the door shut behind them and set her down in the chair nearest the fireplace. The embers from the evening's fire were still glowing, and he quickly added kindling and fresh wood until flames leaped up, casting warm light through the single room. In the firelight, the extent of her injuries became clear. The bruises were worse than he thought, and there was dried blood at her hairline and on her torn dress. Her feet were bare and bloody, the skin torn and raw. Declan felt a cold fury building in his chest, the kind of rage he had not felt in years. "What is your name?" he asked, moving to the basin where he kept water and grabbing a clean cloth. "Penelope," she wrapped her arms around herself. "Penelope Harper." "I am Declan Vaughn. How far did you run, Penelope?" 50 miles. Her voice was still barely more than a whisper. "Maybe more. I left Red Creek 2 days ago. I have been walking ever since." 2 days, 50 miles. Through the Colorado mountains with no shoes, no supplies, nothing but terror driving her forward. Declan brought the cloth and a bowl of water to her and knelt down in front of the chair. "I need to clean these wounds. It's going to hurt." She nodded, and he began with her feet, as gently as he could manage with his large, calloused hands. She bit her lip hard enough to draw blood but did not make a sound. Up close, he could see she had delicate features despite the bruising, fine bones and dark eyes that probably sparkled when they were not filled with fear. Her hands were small but showed calluses of their own, the kind that came from hard work. "Who did this to you?" Declan asked as he worked, though he thought he already knew the answer. Only one kind of man left marks like these. "His name is Marcus Tate." Penelope's voice was flat now, empty. "I was promised to him when I was 17. My father owed him money, a gambling debt, and Marcus said he would forgive it if I married him. My father agreed without asking me. We have been married 3 years. Married. The word hit Declan like a physical blow. He kept his hands steady on her injured feet, kept his voice calm. "And he did this to you." "He did worse." Penelope looked into the fire, her eyes distant. "Every time I did something wrong, every time I spoke without permission, every time I looked at him the wrong way. At first I thought maybe I could learn to be what he wanted. Then I realized nothing I did would ever be enough. He enjoyed it, the hurting. It made him feel powerful." Declan finished with her feet and moved to the cut on her forehead. "What made you run?" "He killed our neighbor's dog because it barked at him." She met his eyes, and he saw the horror there, fresh and raw. "He beat that poor animal to death with a shovel while laughing, and I finally knew, that if I stayed any longer, he was going to kill me too. So I waited until he was drunk and asleep, and I ran. I just ran." "You did the right thing," Declan said firmly. He finished cleaning the visible wounds and stood, moving to his trunk where he kept spare clothes. He pulled out one of his shirts, which would be enormous on her, but clean and warm. "Here, let me step outside while you change out of that dress. Then you need to eat something and sleep." "I cannot stay here." Panic crept back into her voice. "If Marcus finds me here, he will kill you. He will kill both of us." Declan turned to face her fully, and something in his expression must have conveyed what he was feeling because she went quiet. "Nobody is going to hurt you again, Penelope. Not while I am breathing. You're going to stay here tonight, and tomorrow we will figure out what comes next. But right now, you need rest." She searched his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Declan stepped out onto the porch and closed the door behind him, giving her privacy. The night was still and cold around him, and somewhere in the distance, that wolf pack howled again. He thought about what she had told him, about a man named Marcus Tate who thought his wife was property to be beaten and broken. Declan had seen men like that before, had grown up with a father who treated his mother the same way until the day she died. He had sworn he would never be that kind of man, had left civilization behind, partly because he feared the anger he carried inside might turn him into something he hated. But this was different. This anger was righteous, protective. This anger had a purpose. The door opened behind him, and Penelope stood there in his shirt, which hung past her knees. She looked impossibly young and vulnerable, and also impossibly brave for having survived what she had survived. "You can come back in," she said. Declan followed her inside. She had folded her ruined dress and set it on the floor by the door, and now she stood uncertainly in the middle of the cabin, clearly unsure what to do next. Declan moved to the small kitchen area and began pulling together food. Dried venison, some bread he had baked 3 days ago, a jar of preserves. It was not much, but it was something. "Sit," he told her, gesturing to the table. "Eat." Penelope sat and began to eat slowly, carefully, like she was afraid the food might be taken away. Declan watched her and felt that protective fury building again. He busied himself making coffee, strong and hot, and poured them each a cup. "How long have you been up here?" Penelope asked after a while, her voice stronger now that she had some food in her. 3 years, give or take, Declan said. He settled into the chair across from her. "I trap and hunt, trade pelts and meat in town when I need supplies. It is a simple life, but it is mine. Do you ever get lonely?" The question was innocent, but it hit deeper than she probably intended. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but lonely is better than some alternatives." She seemed to understand what he meant. They sat in comfortable silence while she finished eating, and then Declan showed her to his bed. It was the only bed in the cabin, a sturdy frame he had built himself with a thick mattress stuffed with pine needles and whatever softness he could find. "I cannot take your bed," Penelope protested. "You can and you will," Declan said. "I will sleep on the floor. I've done it plenty of times." She looked like she wanted to argue more, but exhaustion was clearly winning the battle. She climbed into the bed and pulled the heavy blankets up to her chin. Declan banked the fire and spread his own bedroll on the floor near the hearth. He was used to sleeping light, and tonight would be no different. If anyone came near this cabin, he would know it. "Declan," Penelope's voice came soft from the bed. "Yes?" "Thank you. For everything. Get some sleep, Penelope. We will talk more in the morning." He listened as her breathing gradually slowed and deepened, and finally she slept. Declan lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened in the last hour. His solitary life had just become a great deal more complicated, but as he thought about the terrified woman sleeping in his bed, about the strength it must have taken to run 50 miles through the wilderness to escape a monster, he realized he did not mind the complication at all. Morning came bright and clear, sunlight streaming through the cabin windows and falling across Penelope's sleeping face. Declan had been awake for an hour already, moving quietly around the cabin, stoking the fire and preparing breakfast. He had shot a rabbit 2 days ago and still had some of the meat left, which he was now frying in a pan with some wild onions he had found by the stream. Penelope stirred and sat up slowly, wincing as her battered body reminded her of what she had been through. She looked around the cabin with clearer eyes now, taking in the rough but solid construction, the furs hanging on the walls, the tools and supplies organized with military precision. Her gaze landed on Declan at the stove, and something flickered across her face. In the morning light, she could see him properly for the first time. He was massive, all broad shoulders and thick arms, his muscles visible even through his shirt as he worked. His dark hair fell past his shoulders, and his beard was full but trimmed. There were scars on his hands and forearms, the marks of a hard life lived in wild places. "Good morning," he said without turning around, somehow knowing she was awake. "How are you feeling?" "Sore," Penelope admitted, "but better than yesterday." "That is good. Breakfast is almost ready." He plated the food and brought it to the table, then poured more coffee for both of them. Penelope got out of bed carefully and joined him at the table. In the daylight, Declan could see more details about her too. Despite the bruises and exhaustion, she was beautiful, with fine features and dark hair that probably fell in waves when it was clean. Her eyes were a deep brown, intelligent and watchful. They ate in silence for a few minutes before Declan spoke. "We need to figure out what to do next. Your husband is going to be looking for you." Penelope flinched at the word husband, but nodded. "Marcus will not give up. He sees me as his property, and he does not let go of what he thinks belongs to him. I thought maybe if I could get far enough away, start over somewhere, he would never find me." "Where were you trying to get to?" "Anywhere. Nowhere. I did not have a plan beyond running." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup like it could give her strength. "I know I cannot stay here. It is not fair to put you in danger. But I do not know where else to go." Declan leaned back in his chair, thinking. "The nearest real town is Ventura Springs, about 30 miles west of here. But if your husband is searching, that's probably one of the first places he will look. There are other options, though. I have friends, people who owe me favors. We could get you somewhere safe, somewhere far from Red Creek." "Why would you help me?" Penelope asked suddenly. "You do not know me. For all you know, I am lying about everything." "Are you lying?" No." "Then that is why." Declan met her eyes steadily. "Nobody deserves what he did to you, and anybody brave enough to run 50 miles through the mountains deserves a chance at a better life." Penelope looked down at her hands, and Declan saw tears gathering in her eyes. "I have not met many good men," she said quietly. "My father was weak, and Marcus was evil. I started to think maybe that was just how men were." "Some men are evil," Declan agreed. "Some are weak. But some of us try to be better. Some of us fail at it sometimes, but we keep trying." She looked up at him, and something passed between them in that moment, a connection neither of them expected. It was quickly buried under more practical concerns, though. "What do we do first?" she asked. "First, you heal. You are in no condition to travel anywhere right now. A few days of rest, proper food, and care for those injuries. Then, We make a plan. Declan stood and began clearing the breakfast dishes. In the meantime, you are safe here. This cabin is invisible from any trail, and I know these mountains better than anyone. If your husband comes looking, I will know about it long before he gets close. You keep calling him my husband, Penelope said, her voice hardening. But that word means partnership, commitment, love. Marcus is none of those things. He is just a man who owns a piece of paper that says I belong to him. You are right, Declan said. I apologize. That man does not deserve the title. Over the next few days, they fell into an unexpected rhythm. Declan went about his usual routines, checking trap lines and gathering firewood, hunting and fishing, but always staying close enough to the cabin to hear if anything was wrong. Penelope rested and healed, and slowly the color came back to her face. The bruises began to fade, and the cuts scabbed over and started to heal. She insisted on helping around the cabin despite Declan's protests, mending his clothes and organizing his supplies, cooking when she was strong enough. They talked while they worked, sharing pieces of their lives. Penelope told him about growing up in Red Creek, about her mother who died when she was young, about her father's descent into gambling and drink. She told him about the early days of her marriage when she still thought she could make it work, and the slow, terrible realization that she was trapped with a man who would eventually kill her. Declan told her about his own childhood in Missouri, about a father who ruled their home with an iron fist and a mother who tried to shield him from the worst of it. He told her about coming west after his mother died, about fighting in the Indian Wars and hating every minute of it, about finally deserting and running to these mountains where nobody asked questions and nobody expected anything from him. "Do you regret deserting?" Penelope asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. "No," Declan said honestly. "That war was wrong. We were taking land that was not ours, killing people who had every right to fight back. I could not be part of it anymore. The army calls me a coward and a deserter, but I sleep better now than I did when I was wearing that uniform." "You are not a coward," Penelope said firmly. "A coward would have left me under that porch." Declan smiled, a rare expression that transformed his usually stern face. "I suppose that is true. Can I ask you something personal?" "You can ask." I might not answer. "Have you ever been married? Ever been in love?" Declan was quiet for a long moment, watching the light fade from the sky. "Once," he finally said. "Her name was Sarah. We met in Missouri before the war. She was beautiful and kind, and somehow she saw something in me worth loving. We were going to get married, start a farm, have children. Then I got conscripted into the army, and by the time I made it back to Missouri, she had married someone else, a banker, someone safe and stable and there." He paused. "I do not blame her. She deserves a good life. Do you still love her?" "I think part of me always will, but it is a different kind of love now, more like a memory of what might have been than anything real." He glanced at Penelope. "What about you? Did you love anyone before Marcus?" "There was a boy," Penelope admitted. "Thomas Reed. He worked at the general store. We used to talk when I came in to buy supplies, and I thought maybe something might happen between us. But then my father made his bargain with Marcus, and that was the end of that. I heard Thomas left Red Creek shortly after. I hope he found happiness somewhere." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge overhead, a million points of light in the vast darkness. Declan was acutely aware of Penelope sitting close beside him, could smell the soap she had used to wash her hair in the stream that afternoon, could feel the warmth of her presence. Something was shifting between them. He could feel it, something that went beyond gratitude or simple human connection. It scared him more than he wanted to admit. On the 7th day after Penelope's arrival, Declan was checking his northern trap line when he saw the smoke. It was too thin to be a forest fire, too deliberate. A campfire, maybe 2 miles distant. He went perfectly still, every sense alert, scanning the forest around him. Visitors were rare this far into the mountains, and coincidences were dangerous things to believe in. He left the trapline unfinished and moved quickly back toward the cabin, using every bit of cover the forest provided. As he got closer, he slowed down, approaching from an angle that would let him see the clearing before anyone in it could see him. Relief flooded through him when he saw Penelope on the porch. hanging his newly washed shirts to dry. She was safe, for now. He emerged from the tree line, and she looked up with a smile that faded when she saw his expression. "What's wrong?" "There's a camp a few miles north of here. Could be trappers or prospectors, but I do not like the timing." He climbed the porch steps and put his rifle just inside the door where it would be within easy reach. "Did you see or hear anything unusual today?" "No, nothing. It has been quiet." Fear crept back into her eyes. "Do you think it is Marcus?" "I do not know, but we need to be careful," Declan thought quickly. "Tonight you stay inside with the door barred. Keep away from the windows. I'm going to go back out there and see what I can learn." "No," Penelope said sharply. "If it is Marcus, if you confront him alone—" "I am not going to confront anyone. I am just going to look to see who we are dealing with." He put his hands on her shoulders, felt her trembling slightly under his palms. "Penelope, I need you to trust me. I have been living in these mountains for 3 years, and I am very good at not being seen when I do not want to be seen." She looked up at him, and he saw the struggle playing out across her face, fear warring with trust, trauma warring with hope. Finally, she nodded. "Be careful, please." "Always am." He squeezed her shoulders gently and then released her, already mentally preparing for the reconnaissance ahead. As twilight settled over the mountains, Declan moved through the forest like a ghost. He had learned tracking and stealth from a Ute scout during his army days, one of the few good things he had taken from that experience. Now, he used every bit of that knowledge to approach the campsite without being detected. He smelled the camp before he saw it, the scent of coffee and fried bacon carrying on the evening breeze. He moved closer, settling into a dense thicket of brush that gave him a clear view while keeping him hidden. There were 3 men sitting around the fire, and Declan's blood ran cold when he got a good look at them. The first man was tall and thin with a mean face and cold eyes. He wore a gun belt slung low on his hips like a man who knew how to use it. The second was shorter and stockier, with a tobacco-stained beard and nervous hands that kept fidgeting with a knife. But it was the third man who held Declan's attention. He was well-dressed for the mountains, his clothes expensive, and his boots polished even after days of travel. He had blonde hair and fine features that might have been handsome if not for the cruel set of his mouth and the dead look in his eyes. Marcus Tate. It had to be. "She cannot have gotten far on foot," the blond man was saying, his voice carrying clearly across the campsite. "The tracker in Red Creek said she headed west into the mountains. These peaks are the first real shelter she would have reached." "We have been searching for a week, Mr. Tate," the tall, thin man said. "Maybe she died out here. A woman alone, no supplies. She could have fallen off a cliff or gotten eaten by a bear." "She is not dead," Marcus said with absolute certainty. "I would know if she was dead. No, she found shelter somewhere, and we are going to find her. And when we do, I'm going to teach her a lesson she will never forget." The way he said it made Declan's skin crawl. The casual cruelty, the absolute ownership in his tone. This was a man who viewed Penelope as property that had escaped, nothing more. "What about that hermit supposed to live up here?" the stocky man asked. "The trapper. Maybe she found his place." "Then we find the trapper," Marcus said, "and we ask him nicely if he has seen my wife. I am sure he will be happy to cooperate." The 3 men laughed, and there was nothing nice about that laughter. Declan had heard enough. He backed away from the campsite as carefully as he had approached, not making a sound. Only when he was a safe distance away did he allow himself to move faster, eating up the ground between the camp and his cabin with long strides. Penelope met him at the door, her face white with worry. "Well?" "It is him. Marcus and 2 hired guns, maybe bounty hunters or just men willing to do anything for money." Declan closed and barred the door behind him. "They know there is a trapper in these mountains, and they're going to come looking for me to ask if I have seen you." "Then I need to leave, right now. I cannot let you get hurt because of me." "You're not going anywhere in the dark through mountains you do not know." Declan moved to the window and looked out at the deepening night. "We have a little time. They will not move until morning, and they do not know where my cabin is. But we need a plan." They sat at the table, and Declan spread out a rough map he had drawn of the area from memory. "Your best chance is to get to Ventura Springs. It is a real town with a sheriff and laws. Marcus might have a paper saying you are married, but if you testify to what he did to you, the law might protect you." Might. Penelope repeated bitterly. Or they might send me right back to him. I am his wife legally, Declan. The law does not care much about what a husband does to his property. She was right, and they both knew it. The laws of 1878 were not kind to women in bad marriages. Then we go farther, Declan said. California maybe, Oregon, somewhere far enough that even if Marcus keeps looking, he will never find you. We, Penelope looked at him sharply. Declan, I cannot ask you to give up your life here for me. You are not asking, I am offering. He met her eyes across the table. The truth is, Penelope, I have been alone up here for 3 years, and I thought that was what I wanted. But this past week, having you here, talking with you, seeing you get stronger every day, it made me realize something. I do not want to be alone anymore, and if helping you means leaving these mountains behind, then that is what I am going to do. Tears spilled down Penelope's cheeks. You would do that? For me? Yes. The word came out rougher than he intended, heavy with emotion he had kept buried for too long. I would do that for you. She stood and moved around the table, and before Declan fully realized what was happening, she was in his arms. He held her carefully, conscious of how much bigger he was, how easily he could hurt her if he was not gentle. But she pressed against him like she was trying to merge into his skin, her face buried against his chest. I am scared, she whispered. I know, but we will get through this, together. They stayed like that for a long moment before Penelope pulled back slightly to look up at him. She was so close, her face tilted up toward his, her eyes searching his features. Declan felt his heart hammering in his chest, felt the pull toward her like gravity. Declan, she breathed, and then he was kissing her. It started gentle, tentative, giving her every chance to pull away. But instead, she pressed closer, her hands coming up to tangle in his hair, and the kiss deepened. It was nothing like the practiced seductions of his youth. This was raw and honest and full of all the things neither of them knew how to say out loud. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Declan rested his forehead against hers. We should not have done that, he said, though he made no move to let her go. Probably not, Penelope agreed. But I am not sorry. Neither am I. He cupped her face in his large hands, his thumbs gentle on her cheekbones. But Penelope, you need to understand something. You have been through hell, and you are still healing. I do not want you to feel like you owe me anything, or like you have to feel something for me just because I helped you. Is that what you think this is? She pulled back far enough to look him in the eye properly. Declan Vaughn, I am not confused about what I feel. Yes, I am grateful to you for saving my life. But what I feel right now, standing here with you, that is not gratitude. That is something else entirely. What is it then? His voice was rough with hope and fear mixed together. I think it might be love, Penelope said softly. Or at least the beginning of it. I know it is fast. I know we barely know each other. But nothing about this situation is normal, and I have learned that life is too short and too uncertain to hide from the truth. The truth is that when I look at you, I feel safe for the first time in years. When I talk to you, I feel heard. When you touch me, I do not flinch with fear. I feel alive. Declan pulled her close again, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the rightness of her in his arms. Then we will face whatever comes together, he said, starting with getting you away from Marcus Tate permanently. They spent the rest of the evening preparing. Declan packed supplies for a long journey, filling his saddlebags with dried food, ammunition, and essentials. He had 2 horses in a small corral behind the cabin, both mountain-bred and tough as iron. They would need that toughness for what was coming. As night deepened, they lay together in his bed, not making love, but holding each other close, finding comfort in presence and touch. Penelope's breathing eventually slowed into sleep, but Declan stayed awake, listening to the night sounds, planning their escape route in his mind. The dawn came gray and cold with a threat of rain in the air. Declan rose quietly and started preparing breakfast while Penelope still slept. He was frying bacon when she woke and joined him, her hair loose around her shoulders, still wearing his oversized shirt. We should leave within the hour, Declan said as he plated food for them both. Get ahead of them before they start searching in earnest. Penelope nodded and began eating. though Declan could see the tension in her shoulders, the fear in her eyes. He wished he could promise her that everything would be fine, that they would definitely escape. But he had learned long ago not to make promises he might not be able to keep. They were finishing breakfast when Declan heard it, the sound of horses moving through the forest, at least 3 of them, coming from the direction of the camp he had scouted. He held up a hand for silence, and Penelope went rigid, her fork frozen halfway to her mouth. "They are here," Declan said quietly. He stood and moved to the window, careful to stay out of sight. Through the trees he could make out movement, the shapes of men on horseback picking their way through the forest toward his cabin. "What do we do?" Penelope's voice was barely a whisper. "We play this smart." Declan's mind was racing through options. "Hide in the root cellar beneath the floor. There's a trap door under the rug by the bed. Get down there and stay quiet no matter what you hear. I'm going to talk to them, see if I can convince them to move on." "What if they do not believe you? What if they search the cabin?" "Then I will handle it." He moved to her and took her face in his hands. "Trust me, Penelope, please." She nodded, and he helped her move the rug and open the trap door. The root cellar was small but deep, carved into the earth beneath the cabin and used for storing food through the winter. Penelope climbed down the ladder and Declan handed her the rifle. "If anything goes wrong, if you hear gunshots, you wait until it is completely quiet, and then you run. Take the horses and head west. Do not stop until you reach Ventura Springs." "Declan, promise me." "I promise," she whispered, her eyes shining with tears. He closed the trap door and replaced the rug, then moved the bed slightly to make it less obvious. By the time he finished, the riders were entering his clearing. Declan took a deep breath, checked that his pistol was loaded and in easy reach, and stepped out onto the porch. There were 3 men on horseback, just as he had seen the night before. Marcus Tate sat his horse like a king, surveying his domain, flanked by his 2 hired guns. Up close and in daylight, Declan could see the cruelty etched into Marcus's features, the arrogance in the set of his shoulders. "Good morning," Declan called out, keeping his voice neutral and his hands visible. "Can I help you gentlemen with something?" Marcus guided his horse forward a few steps. "I'm looking for someone, a woman, about 20 years old, dark hair, pretty. My wife. She ran away from home over a week ago, and I have reason to believe she came this direction. Have you seen her?" "Can't say that I have," Declan replied easily. "I don't get many visitors up here. That's kind of the point." "You're the trapper who lives in these mountains?" "That would be me." "Declan Vaughn." He did not offer his hand. Marcus studied him for a long moment, his cold eyes taking in every detail. "You live alone up here?" "Yes, sir." "Must get lonely." "I prefer it that way." "Then you would not mind if my associates took a look around your cabin, just to be sure my wife is not hiding somewhere?" This was the moment Declan had been dreading. If he refused, it would make them suspicious. If he agreed, they might find the root cellar. He kept his expression neutral and shrugged. "Be my guest, though I'm not sure what you think you will find. As you can see, it is not exactly a large operation." Marcus nodded to his 2 men, and they dismounted. The tall, thin one had his hand resting casually on his gun as he approached the porch, and Declan read the message clearly. They were ready to draw if he gave them any reason. He stepped aside and let them enter the cabin. The sound of them moving around inside, opening trunks and looking under furniture, was like nails on a chalkboard. Declan forced himself to stay calm, to keep his breathing even. Marcus remained on his horse, watching Declan with those dead eyes. "Tell me, Mr. Vaughn, what brings a man to live alone in the mountains like this?" "Same thing that brings most men out here," Declan said. "A desire for peace and quiet. Or maybe running from something?" Marcus tilted his head slightly. "You have the look of a man with a past. We all have pasts." "True enough," Marcus smiled, and it was the coldest expression Declan had ever seen. "My wife has a past, too. Years of being ungrateful, disobedient, hysterical. I tried to be patient with her, tried to teach her how to be a proper wife, but she ran instead of learning her lessons. When I find her, and I will find her, she is going to wish she had stayed home." Declan felt rage building in his chest, hot and dangerous. He kept it locked down through sheer force of will. Maybe she had good reason to run. "A wife's reason does not matter," Marcus said flatly. "She made vows before God and the law. She belongs to me until one of us dies, and I fully intend to outlive her by many years." The two men emerged from the cabin, and the tall, thin one shook his head. Nothing in there but trapping supplies and bachelor living, boss. Relief flooded through Declan, but he did not let it show on his face. Satisfied? Marcus stared at him for another long moment, and Declan had the unsettling feeling that the man could see right through him, could see every lie and every secret. But finally, Marcus nodded and gathered his reins. For now. But Mr. Vaughn, if I find out you have been hiding her, if I discover you lied to me today, I will come back here and burn this cabin to the ground with you inside it. Do we understand each other? Perfectly. Declan met his eyes without flinching. Marcus wheeled his horse around, and the three men rode back into the forest. Declan stayed on the porch, watching until they were completely out of sight and the sound of their horses had faded. Only then did he go back inside and pull up the rug. "They are gone," he called down into the cellar. "You can come up." Penelope climbed out, and the moment she was clear of the ladder, she collapsed against him. He could feel her shaking, could feel the terror pouring off her in waves. "I heard everything," she said, "every word. Declan, we have to run now. If he comes back, he will not come back, not right away." Declan held her close, stroking her hair. "But you are right, we cannot stay here. We leave today, as soon as we can get everything ready." They worked quickly and efficiently, packing everything they would need for a long journey. Declan took what supplies he could carry, along with his weapons and trapping gear. Everything else he left behind. It was just property, easily replaced. Penelope was irreplaceable. Within 2 hours, they were riding west through the mountains, leading a pack horse loaded with their supplies. Declan kept them off the main trails, using game paths and stream beds to hide their passage. He was not particularly worried about Marcus tracking them through the wilderness, but the man had hired professionals, and professionals could be dangerous. They rode hard for most of the day, putting as much distance between themselves and the cabin as possible. By the time the sun was setting, they had covered nearly 20 miles. Declan found a sheltered spot in a small canyon where they could make camp without being visible from any direction. As he tended the horses and started a small fire, Penelope spread out their bedrolls and prepared a simple meal from their supplies. The easy domesticity of it, the way they worked together without needing to discuss who did what, felt right in a way Declan had never experienced before. After they ate, they sat close together by the fire, watching the stars emerge overhead. The May night was cool at this elevation, and Penelope leaned against Declan's side, his arm around her shoulders. "Do you think he will keep looking?" she asked quietly. "Men like Marcus do not give up easily," Declan said honestly. "But the farther we get from Red Creek, the harder it will be for him to find us. And eventually, even obsession has limits. He will either give up or he will run out of money to pay those men who ride with him. And if he does not, then we will deal with that when it comes." Declan tightened his arm around her. "But Penelope, I need you to hear me. No matter what happens, I am not going to let him take you. I would die before I let him hurt you again." She turned to look up at him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "I do not want you to die. I want you to live. With me. That is my plan too." He smiled slightly. "Live with you. Maybe find a place to settle down somewhere far from here. Build a new cabin, start a new life. Together? If that is what you want. It is exactly what I want." She reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his beard. "I know we have not known each other very long. I know everything between us is happening fast, but Declan, I meant what I said last night. I think I am falling in love with you. No, I know I am." Declan turned to face her fully, his large hands cupping her face with infinite gentleness. "I'm falling in love with you too. Maybe I have been since the moment I saw you under my porch, so small and scared and brave. You are the strongest person I have ever met, Penelope Harper. I do not feel strong. That is exactly what makes you strong. You feel all that fear, all that pain, and you keep going anyway. That is real courage." She kissed him then, and it was deeper than the kiss they had shared the night before, more certain. Declan responded carefully, always conscious of what she had been through, always giving her the space to pull back if she needed to. But she did not pull back. Instead, she pressed closer, her hands sliding up his chest to lock behind his neck. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Penelope rested her forehead against his. "I want to be with you," she whispered, "truly with you, but I'm afraid." "Of me?" "No, never of you. Of myself, of the memories. What if I freeze up? What if I cannot do this?" Declan stroked her hair, his touch infinitely gentle. "Then we stop. Penelope, there is no rush. We have all the time in the world to figure this out together, and if tonight is not the right night, or if tomorrow is not the right day, that is fine. I am not going anywhere." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "How are you real? How can you be this patient and kind after everything you have been through?" "Because someone taught me that the violence we experience does not have to define us. We can choose to be different, to be better." He wiped away her tears with his thumbs. "And because you deserve patience and kindness, you deserve everything good this world has to offer." They made love that night under the stars, slowly and carefully, with Declan constantly checking that she was okay, that she wanted to continue. Penelope cried at first, but they were not tears of pain. They were tears of release, of finally being touched with tenderness instead of cruelty, of discovering that intimacy could be beautiful instead of terrifying. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bedroll, Penelope's head on Declan's broad chest, his arms wrapped protectively around her. "I love you," she said softly. "I know it is fast. I know it is probably foolish. But I love you, Declan Vaughn." "It is not foolish," Declan rumbled, his voice vibrating through his chest. "And I love you too, Penelope Harper. I think I probably have since that first night when you crawled out from under my porch looking like you had fought off a pack of wolves and won." She laughed, and the sound of it was so pure and joyful that Declan felt something loosen in his chest, some old wound finally beginning to heal. They traveled for another 3 days, always heading west, always staying off the main trails. The country they passed through was spectacular. High mountain passes giving way to deep valleys, crystal clear streams tumbling over rocks worn smooth by centuries of water. They saw elk and deer, caught fish for their suppers, and slowly left the world behind. On the 4th day, they crested a ridge and saw Ventura Springs spread out in the valley below. It was larger than Declan had expected, a real town with streets and buildings, a church steeple rising above the other structures. Smoke rose from dozens of chimneys, and even from this distance they could see people moving about their business. "That is it?" Penelope asked, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun. "That is it," Declan confirmed. "We can get supplies there, maybe sell some of my furs, and we can decide what to do next." They rode into town as the sun was setting, dusty and tired from days of travel. Ventura Springs was bustling with activity, miners and ranchers mixing with shopkeepers and families. Declan found a stable where they could board their horses, and then he led Penelope to the town's only hotel. The proprietor, a stout woman with kind eyes, took one look at them and smiled. "Newlyweds?" she asked. Declan glanced at Penelope, and she gave a tiny nod. "Yes, madam," he said. "Just married and heading west to start our life together." "How lovely." The woman pulled out her register. "I have a room on the 2nd floor, nice and quiet. How long will you be staying?" "Just a night or 2 while we resupply," Declan said. The woman nodded and took his money, then handed him a key. "Room 7, top of the stairs and to the right. There's a bathhouse around the corner if you want to get cleaned up, and supper is served in the dining room until 8. The room was simple but clean, with a real bed and curtains on the windows. Penelope sank onto the mattress with a sigh of relief. "I had forgotten what it felt like to sleep on something other than the ground," she said. Declan smiled and sat beside her, the bed creaking under his weight. "Why do not you rest for a bit? I'm going to go ask around, see if anyone has heard about Marcus and his men passing through." "Be careful," Penelope said, catching his hand. "Always." He kissed her forehead and then headed back downstairs. The hotel had a small bar attached to it, and Declan ordered a whiskey and settled in to listen. Bartenders heard everything, and sure enough, within 20 minutes, he had learned that no one matching Marcus's description had been through Ventura Springs in the past week. Either they had given up the search, or they were still combing the mountains to the east. Declan hoped it was the former, but he was prepared for the latter. He headed back upstairs and found Penelope awake and looking more rested. They went down to the dining room and ate a proper hot meal, the first they had had in days. The food was simple but good, and Penelope ate with better appetite than Declan had seen before. "What did you learn?" she asked quietly. "They have not been through here," Declan said, "which means either they lost our trail or they are searching the wrong area." "Or they are waiting for us to show ourselves somewhere obvious," Penelope said. "Marcus is not stupid, Declan. He knows we will need to go to a town eventually for supplies." She was right, and Declan knew it. "Then we do not stay here long. We get what we need tomorrow and keep moving. I am thinking California, maybe the coast, somewhere we can disappear completely." "A fresh start," Penelope said softly. "I like the sound of that." That night in the hotel room, they made love again, more confidently this time, learning each other's bodies and rhythms. Afterward, Penelope traced the scars on Declan's chest and arms, each one a story he told her in quiet tones. The knife wound from a bar fight in his wild youth, the bullet graze from the war, the deep gouge across his ribs from a bear that had objected to Declan checking traps too close to its den. "You have lived quite a life," she said. "And now I'm going to live a different one," Declan replied. "A quieter one, with you. Do you think you will miss it? The mountains, the solitude, the adventure?" "I will miss the mountains," Declan admitted. "But the solitude, no. The adventure, maybe a little. But Penelope, the greatest adventure I can imagine right now is building a life with you, seeing what we can create together. That is more exciting to me than any hunt or any fight." She smiled and kissed him, and they fell asleep tangled together as the sounds of the town faded into the quiet of the night. Morning brought disaster. Declan woke to the sound of voices in the street below, loud and angry. He disentangled himself from Penelope and moved to the window, careful to stay out of sight. What he saw made his blood turn to ice. Marcus Tate was in the street below, his two hired guns flanking him. They were talking to the stable owner, and even from the second floor, Declan could see the man pointing toward the hotel. "Get dressed," Declan said urgently, already pulling on his clothes. "They are here." Penelope went white, but moved quickly, grabbing her dress and shoes. "How did they find us?" "Does not matter right now." Declan buckled on his gun belt and grabbed his rifle. "We need to get out of here before they come upstairs." But they were too late. Heavy footsteps sounded in the hallway outside, and then someone was pounding on the door. "Declan Vaughn," Marcus's voice called out. "I know you are in there. I know you have my wife. Come out peacefully, and maybe I will let you live." Declan looked at Penelope, saw the terror on her face, and made a decision. "The window," he whispered, "onto the roof of the porch." He pushed the window open as quietly as he could and helped Penelope climb through. The sloped roof of the front porch was just below, and she scrambled down onto it carefully. Declan followed, his larger frame making more noise, and they were halfway to the edge when Marcus's voice rang out again from inside the room. "They are on the roof. Circle around." Declan and Penelope dropped from the porch roof into the alley beside the hotel, and Declan grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the back of the building. They could hear shouting behind them, boots pounding on the boardwalk. The stable was 50 yards away, their horses within reach if they could just get there first. They almost made it. Marcus appeared at the end of the alley, his pistol drawn. "Stop right there," he said coldly. "It is over, Penelope. Time to come home." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Penelope said, and Declan heard the strength in her voice, the resolve. She was not the same terrified woman who had hidden under his porch. She had found her courage, and she was not going to back down. "You do not have a choice, sweetheart." Marcus took a step forward. "You are my wife. That means you belong to me. Now come here before I have to hurt your mountain man friend." "If you want her, you will have to go through me," Declan said evenly. He had not drawn his pistol yet, but his hand rested on the grip, ready. Marcus laughed. "You really think you are faster than me? I have killed 6 men in duels, Trapper. How many have you killed?" "Enough to know I do not want to kill anyone else," Declan said. "But I will if I have to. If you try to take her, one of us is going to die in this alley. Is that really what you want?" For a moment, something flickered across Marcus's face. Doubt, maybe, or calculation. But then it hardened again into that cold cruelty Declan had seen before. "She is worth it," Marcus said. "I am not going to let some mountain savage steal what belongs to me." "I am not property," Penelope said, her voice ringing out clear and strong. "I am a human being, and I am done letting you treat me like I'm something you own. If you come after us, Marcus, if you try to take me back, I will fight you every step of the way, and so will Declan. Is that really the life you want? Always looking over your shoulder, always wondering when we are going to fight back?" Marcus's face contorted with rage. "You ungrateful bitch, after everything I gave you, after everything I did for you." "You gave me nothing but pain," Penelope interrupted, "and whatever you think I owe you, I have paid for it in blood and tears. We are done, Marcus. Let us go, and we will disappear. You will never see us again, or try to take me, and one way or another, this ends today." For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Declan could feel his heart pounding, could feel the weight of his pistol, could see the calculation happening behind Marcus's cold eyes. The man was a killer, but he was also a coward, and cowards did not like fair fights. "You are making a mistake," Marcus finally said, but he was backing up slightly, his gun lowering. "Both of you. I will find you eventually, and when you do, you will find two people who have built a life together," Declan said. "And I promise you, Marcus Tate, if you ever come near Penelope again, if you ever try to hurt her, it will be the last thing you do. That is not a threat. That is a promise." Marcus stared at them for another moment, and then he holstered his pistol. "This is not over," he said. "Yes, it is," Penelope replied. "Goodbye, Marcus." She turned her back on him, and Declan kept himself between them as they walked toward the stable. Every step he expected to hear the sound of a pistol being drawn, the explosion of a gunshot, but it never came. Marcus watched them go, and by the time they reached the stable, he had disappeared. They saddled their horses with shaking hands and rode out of Ventura Springs at a gallop, not slowing until the town was miles behind them. Only then did Penelope start to cry, huge racking sobs that shook her entire body. Declan pulled his horse up and dismounted, then helped her down and held her while she cried out all the fear and relief and residual terror. "It is over," he murmured into her hair. "You faced him, and you won. He's not going to come after us. Men like that, they cannot stand being humiliated, being beaten. He will slink back to Red Creek and tell everyone you died in the mountains that he could not find you. But he will not keep looking. His pride would not let him." "Are you sure?" Penelope asked through her tears. Yes, and Declan was sure. He had seen it in Marcus's eyes, that moment when the man realized he had lost, that Penelope was beyond his reach. Marcus would move on to some other poor woman to torment, would find a new victim to make himself feel powerful. But he was done with Penelope. They rode west for another week, passing through small mining camps and scattered settlements, always moving, always putting more distance between themselves and the life Penelope had escaped. The land changed around them, the high peaks giving way to rolling hills, the pine forests transitioning to oak and grassland. They were heading toward California, toward the coast and a new beginning. One evening they camped beside a stream that bubbled over smooth rocks, the water clear and cold from mountain snowmelt. They had caught fish for supper, and as they ate, Penelope looked at Declan across the small fire. "What do you want from life?" she asked. "Really want, I mean. Not what you think you should want, but what you actually dream about." Declan considered the question carefully. "I want peace," he said finally. "I want to wake up in the morning next to someone I love and know that we are safe, that we have built something good together. I want to work with my hands, maybe ranch or farm, create something lasting. And I want children someday, if that is something you want. A family. The kind of family I never had growing up." "I want all those things too," Penelope said softly. "I want to feel safe enough to build a future. I want to raise children who never know what it is like to be afraid in their own home. And I want to do all that with you, Declan. Only you." "Then that is what we will build," Declan promised, "together." They reached the California coast in early June 1878, emerging from the hills to see the Pacific Ocean spread out before them like a blue infinity. Penelope had never seen the ocean before, and she stood on the bluff overlooking the water with tears streaming down her face. "It is so beautiful," she breathed. So big. It is something, Declan agreed. He stood beside her, his arm around her shoulders, and looked out at the waves rolling in to crash against the rocks below. The air smelled of salt and kelp, completely different from the pine and granite scent of the mountains he had called home for 3 years. They found a small town called Lighthouse Point, a fishing and farming community clinging to the coast, where nobody asked too many questions about newcomers. Declan had enough money from selling his furs and pelts to buy a small piece of land on the outskirts of town, 10 acres with good soil and a creek running through it. "It is perfect," Penelope said when she saw it for the first time. "We can build our house here, near the creek, and maybe have a garden there and some chickens over there." "And horses," Declan added. "Good California horses." They spent the summer of 1878 building their new life. Declan constructed a cabin with his own hands, larger than his mountain retreat had been, with 2 rooms and a proper loft. Penelope planted a garden and tended it carefully, coaxing vegetables from the soil. They bought chickens and a milk cow, acquired 2 young horses that Declan began training. The people of Lighthouse Point accepted them without question, and within a few months they were part of the community. Declan hired out as a laborer sometimes, his strength and wilderness skills making him valuable for everything from building barns to tracking problem animals. Penelope made friends with the women in town, and slowly, carefully, she began to heal from the wounds Marcus had left on her soul. They were married properly in August by the town's minister, a kindly old man who asked no questions about why they had no family present. Penelope wore a simple white dress that one of the town women had helped her make, and Declan stood beside her in clean trousers and a new shirt, his long hair trimmed slightly for the occasion. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, when Declan kissed her in front of their new community, Penelope felt something shift deep inside her. She was no longer Penelope Harper, trapped in a marriage she never wanted. She was Penelope Vaughn, wife to a good man, mistress of her own fate. That winter was mild by mountain standards, and they spent the long evenings by the fire, reading aloud to each other from the few books they owned, playing cards, making love, and talking about their plans for the future. In February, Penelope realized she was pregnant. She told Declan one evening after supper, simply and directly, "I'm going to have a baby." Declan looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable, and then a smile broke across his face like sunrise. "A baby," he repeated. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Penelope asked, suddenly nervous. "Happy?" Declan stood and swept her into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around the cabin. "Penelope, I am more than happy. I am terrified and thrilled and grateful and a dozen other things I do not have words for. We are going to have a family." He set her down gently, and then he was on his knees in front of her, his large hands resting carefully on her still flat stomach. "Hello in there," he said softly. "I am your father, and I promise you right now, I am going to do everything in my power to give you a good life. You are going to grow up safe and loved, and you will never have to be afraid. That is my vow to you." Penelope rested her hands over his and felt tears slip down her cheeks. These were happy tears, though, tears of joy and hope and possibility. Everything she had survived, all the pain and fear and desperate running, had led her to this moment, to this man and this life and this child growing inside her. Their son was born in October 1879, a squalling red-faced baby with a shock of dark hair and his father's strong lungs. They named him Daniel, after Declan's mother, whose real name had been Daniela. Declan held his son with infinite care, his massive hands gentle as he cradled the tiny body. "He is perfect," Declan said, his voice thick with emotion. "Absolutely perfect." Penelope watched her husband with their child and felt her heart expand until she thought it might burst. This was what love looked like. This was what family meant. Not ownership or fear, but tenderness and protection and the fierce determination to keep each other safe. The years that followed were not always easy, but they were good. They had 2 more children, a daughter they named Rose in 1881, and another son they named Thomas in 1883. Their little farm prospered, and Declan became known throughout the region as an honest man and a skilled horseman. Penelope became a midwife, using knowledge she had learned from the town doctor to help other women through childbirth. Sometimes, late at night when the children were asleep and they lay together in their bed, Penelope would think about that desperate night when she had run 50 miles through the mountains and hidden under a stranger's porch. She would think about how close she had come to dying out there in the wilderness, alone and terrified. And then she would look at the man sleeping beside her, this mountain of a man who had saved her life and then given her a reason to live, and she would send up a silent prayer of gratitude. Declan would sometimes wake and find her watching him, and he would pull her close and kiss her forehead. "What are you thinking about?" he would ask. "How lucky I am," she would always reply. "How incredibly, impossibly lucky." "We both are," Declan would say. "We found each other in the darkness, and we made something beautiful out of all that pain." On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1888, they stood together on the same bluff where they had first seen the ocean. Their children were with Penelope's friend in town, giving them a rare evening alone. The sun was setting over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. "Do you ever regret it?" Penelope asked. "Leaving your mountain? Changing your whole life for me?" "Never," Declan said without hesitation. "Not for a single second. Penelope, before I found you, I was just existing, going through the motions, telling myself I was happy in my solitude when really I was just hiding from life. You gave me a reason to live again. You gave me purpose and joy and a family. You gave me everything that matters." "You saved my life," Penelope said, "literally and figuratively, and you kept saving it every single day since, just by being the man you are." "We saved each other," Declan corrected gently. "That is what love is, I think. Two people choosing every day to save each other, to build something together that neither could build alone." They stood there as the sun sank below the horizon and the first stars emerged overhead, holding hands and watching the waves roll in. Behind them was the life they had built, the home and the children and the community they belonged to. Ahead was the future, unknown but no longer frightening because they would face it together. In the end, that was all that mattered. Not the pain they had endured or the darkness they had escaped, but the love they had found and the life they had created. Penelope had run 50 miles through the wilderness to escape a monster, and she had found a man who taught her that love did not have to hurt, that strength could be gentle, and that even the darkest night could lead to the most beautiful dawn. Years continued to pass in their little coastal haven. By 1895, Daniel was 16, and already showing signs of inheriting his father's size and strength. Rose, at 14, was beautiful and fierce, protective of her younger brother Thomas, who at 12 was the dreamer of the family, always sketching the ocean and the wildlife they saw around their property. The farm had expanded over the years. What started as 10 acres had grown to 30, and they now raised horses that were sought after throughout California. Declan had a gift for training, a patience and understanding of the animals that made even the most spirited horse settle under his hands. People came from as far as San Francisco to buy Vaughn horses. Penelope had become indispensable to the community as a midwife and healer. She had studied everything she could get her hands on about medicine and childbirth, and she had probably delivered half the babies born in Lighthouse Point over the past 15 years. The women trusted her, and she took that trust seriously, never forgetting how vulnerable she had once been, how much she had needed someone to believe in her. One spring morning in 1895, a young woman showed up at their door. She was maybe 19, with a black eye and a split lip, and she was clearly pregnant. Penelope took one look at her and knew exactly what she was seeing. She saw herself 17 years ago, desperate and running. "Please," the young woman said, "I heard there was a woman here who helps people. I do not have anywhere else to go." Penelope opened the door wide. "Come in. You are safe here." The young woman's name was Clara, and over the next few days her story emerged: an abusive husband, a family that would not help, a desperate flight to find somewhere, anywhere that might offer safety. Declan and Penelope listened without judgment, and when Clara finished, Penelope took her hands. "You can stay here as long as you need to," Penelope said. "We have room, and we understand what you are going through better than most. Nobody will hurt you here." Clara stayed for 3 months, long enough to have her baby, a healthy girl she named Hope. During that time, she healed in body and spirit, helped by Penelope's gentle care and Declan's quiet protection. The children accepted her presence without question, Daniel even building her a small privacy screen in the barn so she would have her own space. When Clara was ready to leave, to head north to Oregon where she had family who had promised to take her in, she hugged Penelope tight. "You saved my life," she whispered. "Both of you did." "Pay it forward," Penelope told her. "When you meet someone who needs help, who needs kindness, you give it to them. That is how we make the world better, one person at a time." Clara promised she would, and then she was gone, heading north with her baby and a new chance at life. After she left, Declan found Penelope standing on their porch, looking out at the ocean with tears on her cheeks. "What is it?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I was just thinking about how far we have come," Penelope said, "how we took the worst thing that ever happened to me and turned it into something good. We are helping people, Declan. We are making a difference." "You are making a difference," Declan corrected. "You and that huge heart of yours." "We are doing it together," Penelope insisted. She turned in his arms to face him. "Everything good in my life I share with you. Everything I am because you showed me what love really means." He kissed her then, gentle and deep, and they stood there on their porch as the sun climbed higher in the sky, two people who had found each other in the darkness and built a life filled with light. More years passed and their children grew. Daniel married a local girl named Sarah in 1898, and they started a horse breeding operation on land adjacent to Declan and Penelope's property. Rose became a teacher, fierce and passionate about education, determined that every child in Lighthouse Point would learn to read and write. Thomas eventually moved to San Francisco to study art, but he came home regularly, bringing paintings of the city that amazed his family. In 1900, Declan and Penelope became grandparents when Daniel and Sarah had a son. They named him Declan after his grandfather, and when Declan held his grandson for the first time, Penelope saw tears in her husband's eyes. "Never thought I would live to see this," Declan said quietly. "Never thought I deserved this much happiness." "You deserve every bit of it," Penelope told him. "You are the best man I have ever known, and I am grateful every day that I crawled under your porch all those years ago." They laughed about that sometimes now, about the sheer improbability of their meeting. What were the chances that she would run exactly far enough to reach his cabin? What were the chances that he would hear her that night, that he would choose to help her instead of turning her away? Sometimes it seemed like divine intervention, like they were meant to find each other against all odds. By 1905, they were in their late 40s, still healthy and active, but starting to feel the years. Declan's hair had gone silver, though he was still as strong as ever, and Penelope had laugh lines around her eyes and mouth from decades of smiling. They still worked the farm together, still rode their horses along the beach, still made love with the passion of newlyweds, despite the passage of time. One evening, they sat on their porch watching the sunset, a ritual they had maintained for nearly 30 years. Their grandchildren were playing in the yard, Daniel's 2 boys and Rose's infant daughter. The sounds of childish laughter mixed with the crash of distant waves, and Penelope felt a contentment so deep it was almost overwhelming. "Do you ever think about Marcus?" Declan asked suddenly. It was rare for them to talk about that part of her past anymore. It felt like something that had happened to a different person in a different life. "Sometimes," Penelope admitted, "I wonder if he ever found peace, or if he spent his whole life being angry and cruel. I hope not. I hope he changed, became better. But even if he did not, it does not touch us anymore. He is just a memory, and not even a particularly strong one." "I used to worry he would find us," Declan confessed. "For years, every time a stranger came to town, I would tense up, ready to protect you and the children. But it never happened." "He probably did exactly what you predicted," Penelope said. "Went back to Red Creek, told everyone I had died, and eventually found some other poor woman to torment. Men like that do not change, but they do move on when something becomes too difficult. And we made ourselves too difficult to find." "We did it right," Declan agreed. "We disappeared completely and built something so different from that old life that even if he had found us, he would not have recognized what he saw. You are not that scared girl anymore. Penelope, you are a force of nature." She smiled and laced her fingers through his. Only because you taught me I could be. You showed me what strength really means, and it is not about being the biggest or the loudest or the most violent. It is about showing up every day and choosing kindness, choosing love, choosing to build instead of destroy. As the sun dipped below the horizon and their grandchildren were called inside for supper, Declan and Penelope remained on the porch a little longer. They had built something remarkable out of pain and fear, something that would outlast them both. Their children knew love, not violence. Their grandchildren would grow up safe and cherished. And somewhere out there, women like Clara were finding their own paths to freedom, encouraged by the example Penelope had set. "Tell me again," Declan said softly, "about that night you ran." It was a story they revisited occasionally, a reminder of where they had started and how far they had come. Penelope settled back in her chair and began to speak, her voice carrying the weight of memory and the lightness of distance. "I ran 50 miles, she said, through the mountains in the dark, with no shoes and no plan beyond getting away. Every step hurt, every breath burned. But I kept going because the alternative was dying slowly in that house with Marcus. And when I could not run anymore, when my body simply gave out, I saw your cabin. I did not know who lived there or if they would help me. I just knew I needed to hide, so I crawled under your porch and waited for whatever came next. And I heard you scream," Declan continued, picking up the story as he always did. "And you came outside and found me, and you did not turn me away. You did not judge me or blame me or ask what I had done to deserve such treatment. You just helped me." "Because that is what decent people do," Declan said. "They help." "And then we fell in love," Penelope added, smiling, "which was not part of any plan either of us had." "Best unplanned thing that ever happened to me," Declan said. He stood and offered her his hand. "Come on, let's go inside and join our family." Penelope took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. As they walked into their home, surrounded by the laughter and warmth of the family they had created, she felt that familiar surge of gratitude. Life had thrown them together in the worst possible circumstances, and they had turned those circumstances into the best possible life. The years continued to flow like the ocean waves they loved so much. In 1910, Declan and Penelope celebrated their 32nd anniversary and the birth of their 5th grandchild. Rose had another baby, a boy this time, and Thomas had finally married a woman from San Francisco, an artist like himself. Daniel and Sarah were talking about expanding their horse operation, maybe starting to breed cattle too. Declan was now 53 and Penelope 51, both showing the inevitable signs of aging but still vital and engaged with life. Declan still worked the farm every day, his strength seemingly inexhaustible, though he moved a bit slower than he once had. Penelope still delivered babies and tended to the sick, though she had begun training a young woman from town to eventually take over for her. On a cool evening in November 1910, they took one of their sunset rides along the beach. They had been doing this for decades, riding their horses through the surf with the setting sun painting everything gold. It was their time, just the two of them, away from the demands of family and farm and community. "I have been thinking about something," Penelope said as they walked their horses through the shallow water. "What is that?" Declan asked. "About how long we have been together. 32 years, more than half my life now, and every year has been better than the last. Do you know how rare that is?" "I do," Declan said. "Most people settle for good enough, or they stay in situations that make them miserable because they think that is just how life is. We got lucky. We found each other at exactly the right moment, and we built something real." "It was not all luck, though," Penelope argued. "It was also choice. Every day for 32 years, we have chosen each other, chosen to be kind, to be patient, to work through problems instead of running from them. That's not luck. That is commitment." Declan smiled and reached over to take her hand. "You are right, and I will keep choosing you every day for as long as we both live." "And I will keep choosing you," Penelope promised. They rode until the sun had fully set and the stars were emerging overhead, then turned their horses back toward home. The farmhouse was glowing with lamplight, smoke rising from the chimney, the sounds of family drifting out through the windows. This was their kingdom, built with love and stubbornness and the determination to create something better than what either of them had known before. In 1915, Declan was diagnosed with a weak heart by the doctor in town. It was not an immediate crisis, the doctor said, but Declan needed to take things easier, let others do the heavy work. Declan grumbled about it but agreed, and slowly he began to step back from the hardest labor on the farm. Daniel took over more of the daily operations, and Declan transitioned into more of an advisory role, teaching his son and grandsons everything he knew about horses and land management and living in harmony with the natural world. Penelope watched her husband's transition with mixed emotions. Part of her was grateful that he was finally slowing down after decades of hard physical labor. Part of her was terrified that this was the beginning of losing him, that their time together was becoming finite in a way it had not felt before. One night, lying in bed with his arm around her, she voiced her fear. "I am not ready to lose you," she whispered. "You are not going to lose me anytime soon," Declan assured her. "I am too stubborn to die young." "You are already 58. That is not young." "It is young enough," Declan said firmly. "We have years left, Penelope. Years to watch our grandchildren grow, to see what our children build with their lives, to keep loving each other. The doctor said I need to take it easy, not that I'm dying tomorrow." "Promise me we will have more time," Penelope said, knowing even as she said it that it was an impossible promise to make. But Declan made it anyway. "I promise. We will have more time." And he was right. They had 7 more good years together. Years of watching grandchildren graduate from school and start families of their own. Years of quiet evenings on the porch and Sunday dinners with 3 generations gathered around their table. Years of laughter and tears and the deep abiding comfort of truly knowing another person. Declan passed away in his sleep in March 1922, with Penelope beside him. He was 65, and he had lived a good life by any measure. The funeral was attended by what seemed like the entire town of Lighthouse Point, all these people whose lives he had touched with his quiet strength and gentle wisdom. Penelope stood at his grave with their children and grandchildren surrounding her, and she spoke the truth of what they had built together. "He saved my life," she said simply, "and then he spent 34 years showing me what life could be when you were with someone who truly loved you. He was the best man I ever knew, and I am grateful for every single day we had together." She lived for another 15 years after Declan's death, surrounded by family and continuing her work as a midwife and healer. She never remarried, never even considered it. She had found her great love, and nothing could replace what they had shared. Penelope Vaughn passed away peacefully in 1937 at the age of 78, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren. As she lay dying, her last words were about Declan. "Tell him I am coming," she whispered to Daniel. "Tell him I kept choosing him every day, just like I promised." Her funeral was even larger than Declan's had been, a testament to the impact she had made on her community over the decades. They buried her beside Declan on a hill overlooking the ocean they had both loved, under a sky painted with sunset colors. Years later, Daniel would tell his own grandchildren the story of how his parents met, about a young woman who ran 50 miles through the mountains and hid under a stranger's porch, and about the mountain man who found her there and changed both their lives forever. It became a family legend, this story of desperate courage and unexpected love, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, even when everything seems lost, there is always the possibility of finding something beautiful. The farm stayed in the family for generations, passed down from Daniel to his children and eventually to their children. And on clear evenings when the sunset painted the ocean in shades of gold and pink, if you stood very quietly on the porch of that old farmhouse, you could almost feel them there still. Declan and Penelope Vaughn, 2 souls who found each other against all odds and built a life that became a legacy, proving that love, real love, could heal any wound and overcome any obstacle. Their love story was not a fairy tale. It was messy and frightening and born from trauma and desperation, but it was also real and lasting and filled with the kind of joy that comes from choosing each other every single day, from building something beautiful out of ashes and pain. And in the end, that was the greatest legacy they could have left behind. Not just the farm or the family, but the example they set for what love could be when 2 people committed to healing each other and creating something better than what they had known before. The mountains where Declan's first cabin had stood eventually reclaimed the clearing, pine trees growing up through the ruins of the porch where Penelope had once hidden in terror. But the love that began there, on that desperate night in May 1878, echoed through the generations that followed. It lived in the kindness the family showed to strangers, in the way they opened their doors to people in need, in the fierce protection they offered anyone who was vulnerable or afraid. And sometimes, on clear Colorado nights, if you stood very quietly in those mountains, you might hear the ghost of a scream that turned into something else entirely. Not an ending, but a beginning. The moment when two broken people found each other in the darkness and decided to build something beautiful together, one day at a time, for the rest of their lives.